think it's about time we make something else abandoned. One of the original projects on my channel was the abandoned coffee shop. I love that project, and I know a lot of people who watched my channel back then really enjoyed it too. So I'm excited to get back into an abandoned diorama. Also, this is a collaboration, which I really love because that always means you have 2 videos to make sure and watch today. This collaboration is with Whitney. I will leave all her information in the description box below so you can make sure to check out her channel. We are both going to be doing some kind of abandoned or destroyed toy shop, and they're going to be destroyed in different ways. This room box was given to me quite a while ago by my friend Maribel, and it's just been sitting on my shelf, which is a shame because it is such a cool room. Today is going to be turned into a toy store, but not just a toy store that's been taken over by some kind of fungal growth. Mushrooms. That's the plan. I want to do something in between realistically abandoned and a little bit fairy tale. I'm not really quite sure the entire vision yet, but we'll figure it out together. The first thing I'm going to do is start sketching up some ideas and pulling out some miniatures that I think will work in this project. So let's get started. It's kind of a big room. The first thing we're gonna do is check out the room itself. It's a really neat little room. It has an opening door. I am missing one of the windows, but I do have the frame. The top has a little area where a sign would be conveniently located. For some reason, I flipped it over and totally missed that there is a sign on the back, so I currently have it backwards. The interior already has a beautiful wood floor, so I'm not going to have to worry about the flooring, and I do like the color of the wall, so I'm going to leave that as well. I also have this beautiful piece that was sent to me by Dawn. For some reason, I have this upside down. I don't know where my brain was at today, but you will see me have this bar upside down a few times. But what I want to do is turn it into the register area for those who would come into the shop and be shopping. The next thing I'm going to do is just start pulling items from my collection that I think will work in this piece. I created this little dollhouse in a class with Lawana Clark, and I think it's going to be the perfect thing to go in the window. Every single reference I looked up for an old toy shop had a dollhouse sitting somewhere, and of course I am a dollhouse channel, so it just was something that had to be. Now I can go through some of my large furniture collection and start to pick out things that are going to be good shelving for the store. I do have a couple of large shelves and I've just been saving them for something. This one was my great-grandmother's. She had a bunch of thimbles that were displayed on it. So it's kind of a special piece and I haven't had the heart to use it before, but this might just be the project for it. I like the idea of this shop existing over a long time period, so I'm okay with an eclectic look where not all of the furniture looks like it comes from the same time period or even has the same look to it, like the same amount of detail. I did find this other corner shelf that I thought would be better because typically in a shop I think you want to have open shelves. So here is what I was able to grab out of my collection, and it is filling up the shop pretty well. The bar takes up a lot of space, but I do like that. I want it to feel a little bit cramped and overcrowded with the amount of toys I'm going to put in here eventually. So here is my initial layout. I am so excited to get started. This is one of those times where my brain is like, this project is going to use up so much of your furniture. Like, that's what my brain is saying, but when I look at my stash, I still have plenty to go, and that's what a stash is for. It's for using things. And so I think occasionally I have this like wall that's like I put up that say like, oh, this is too special, oh, this is too pristine, oh, this is too nice to use in one of my projects. But if I don't use it, then what if it just never gets used and it stays in a box forever? So I'd rather use something in a project that I'm really excited about than just let it sit there and possibly just go to waste. Oh, there's a dead bug. Like I said, this room has sat up on a shelf for quite a while, so I had some cleaning to do. Even though this will be an abandoned scene, before I start gluing things in, I need to vacuum it. And yes, this was the moment that I realized that my sign was backwards, so I fixed it. The first thing I want to focus on is the exterior of the room because I do have a habit of not even paying attention to the exterior, so I'm going to do that first. I used my cereal box siding technique that I used on the Addams Family house for the side and then painted it black. I kind of went over that really quickly because I've done that many times before. I also fixed this frame. It was kind of in pieces inside of the room. It came with this piece of acetate that I framed inside 4 pieces. So now I have a frame that's clear on the top so you can see inside. I planned out all the wording I wanted for the exterior of the shop. I just kind of looked up some classic examples and I went with toys, gifts, dolls, cars, games, books, and these are all going to be added once I had cut them with my laser cutter. To avoid painting them and possibly getting them stuck within the laser cut sheet, I just used a Sharpie to go over the letters. This is going to soak into the paper, but it's not going to cause the pieces to stick or get all kind of gloopy with acrylic paint. So now I'm going to carefully cut them out and start applying them to the exterior of my store. I'm starting with the "and," which is going to go in the very middle of this sign, and added toys and gifts to the top. I'm keeping a very generic name because it's not the name of the store that's going to tell any kind of story, but I did leave a little bit of an Easter egg with the address, which is 1865. Let me know if that date rings any bells with any of you who may be into books specifically. I'm now going to be working on the windows, and I've decided that I'm going to add the one piece of plastic that I had for the windows in the right side window, and then on the left I am going to make that window look as though it has been broken out, and I will show a reason for why that's been broken out later in this project build. But for now I'm just cutting out the pieces. I'm adding in one little broken piece to the edge, and then I could move on to the sidewalk outside at the front. I originally was just going to paint this gray, but then I really decided I wanted some texture. I wanted to go all out on the exterior because that's something I typically skip. I added some cardstock paper and left gaps in between to make it look like the sidewalk gaps, and then I sanded the paper to make it look a little bit rough, and this made for a really convincing concrete. I painted everything gray, and I'm just going to leave that for now. I will age it a bit more later. At this point, I felt like the broken window frame really needed some broken glass. It was just looking a little bit too empty, so I took some plastic from just like recycled plastic. This isn't anything that came with the room. I cut out some triangles and glued it behind the frame so it looked like there were bits of glass that were still left in the window. Thankfully, I didn't have to have a big piece. I could just cut out little pieces and it gave the effect. Now it's time to age the entire outside of this room, and I had a bit of a hard time because my favorite aging technique is to use watered down black paint. However, the outside of the room is black, so I had to use some watered down white paint, and I really love the effect. It really does make it look old. It looks like the sun has been beating down on the side of the siding. I was able to use some watered down black paint on the lighter areas of the room. I ended up using watered down white, watered down black, and watered down brown for the aging of the exterior of this room. And I really do like how it came together. It looks old, but it's not completely trashed yet, and that comes with the story of this project. As I said before, I really liked the yellow that was on the interior of this project, and I'm glad because I don't know what kind of paint this was, but it was really rejecting my watered down aging, so it must be some kind of enamel paint or oil paint. I'm not quite sure. I'm glad I decided to leave it because it may not have wanted to take paint at all anyway. I also needed to age the floor. All of this is just going to be an initial aging before I start adding things in. I will have to continue to age things as items are added so it all looks cohesive and like it's been sitting together for the amount of time that it's been aging. And just like the outside, I wanted to add white along with the black and brown, and I didn't hold back on the splatters when it came to the floor. Before letting it all dry, I did soak up as much water as I could because I didn't want anything to warp or come undone, and then I let it sit for a very long time with a fan so I knew it was completely dry. Now that the exterior is aged, I can start working on the furniture that we picked out earlier. This is just kind of a base aging. I will have to do a little bit more. But because there are no side access to this project and I have to do everything from the top down, it's a bit easier to do a base coat of aging before I put everything inside. So let's get going on the furniture. It's at this point that I finally realized that I had this beautiful bar upside down. This is the way I took it out of the package when Dawn sent it to me. So I think my brain was just not functioning at that point. I'm going to be turning this into more of a toy shop or just kind of a shop type counter rather than a bar. So I'm going to remove the mirror backing, and thankfully that was really easy to do because it wasn't glued in place. It was just being held there with some supports. But I am going to be putting in some kind of wallpaper to give it more of a toy or childlike look to it. I glued down the top of the bar and then made a copy of the mirror size so that I had a piece of mat board that perfectly fit into the area behind the shelves. And even though I said I was okay with eclectic furniture, this is a little bit too eclectic for me. So I need to take all of this and change it into something that looks like it was at one point meant for this shop. Now the pieces that are natural wood, I am going to leave those wood and just put them off to the side. But the other pieces I am going to paint as if perhaps they were the original furniture pieces that went into this store and they were all painted at the time that the store opened. So I'm going to get out my airbrush and do a base coat of this dark foresty green over the entire thing. And I'm really excited about using green. I know that y'all know me for loving the color brown, but I really do love the color green as well. And this was my chance to just use it all over. Now, my airbrush did clog, and for some reason it just wasn't unclogging at the moment. So in order to keep going, I decided to hand paint a little bit of the rest of it. It really wasn't much left. So if you see some variation in the green or some brush strokes, that's what happened. But I just had to keep going, and I will be unclogging my airbrush a little bit later. I want to highlight the panels of this furniture with a yellow. Originally, I went with a yellow that was a little bit more neon, and it ended up giving me like a John Deere type color theme. So I went with a lighter yellow and started adding details not only to the panels but to the edges. Just using a dotting tool, I added little dots that look like flowers or little designs. And I feel like doing this really made the furniture pieces look cohesive, even though they weren't originally meant to go together. I had this Mary Englebright wallpaper in my collection, so I added that to the back of the bar, which I think really highlighted it and made it all come together as a cohesive set of furniture. And I added back in the wood pieces, which I think are going to give an interesting contrast so that everything is not matchy-matchy. So here is my final set of furniture. It is now ready to be aged, which honestly was kind of painful. I love aging things, but I was so happy with how I had done the cohesive paint job to everything that I kind of was upset that I now had to age it all, but I quickly got over that. I mixed up my black and brown washes as usual and got to work. It was also really painful having to do that to this little dollhouse that has been sitting on my shelf, and I have been looking at it for so many years. But I will tell you, fast forward, future era, at the end, I am so happy with how it all comes out. So it was worth it to do all of this, but it was painful in the moment. I want to admit that I was having a hard time aging it all. Here's a final look at all of the furniture that I aged together. It is looking definitely older, and though it has been through something, and now they are all ready for the toys. For this collab, Whitney and I decided that we would trade toys. So we would send each other some toys that are going to be in our own projects, and the other collaborator would have to incorporate them into their project as well. So I already know what I'm using in my project, and I do have a few extras, so I'm going to pull them out of my organizational bin and make a little gift box for Whitney. I knew somewhat what Whitney's time period was going to be, so I was trying to grab things that I specifically thought would work for that. Of course, I had to add in a few Bentley House Minis items. Then I packaged it all up safely for Whitney and let her know that one side was for the toy shop and then the other side was just for fun, and she didn't have to use those items if she didn't want to. Whenever I pack these boxes, I always think it would be so much more fun if I could give this to my collab partner in person. Surprise! Whitney is here! This is Whitney Labrie from Whitney Labrie Miniatures, and we are going to do this swap in person. She happened to be in town, and so it just worked out.
Perfect.
There you go. All right, so I think we're just going to open them up, kind of get our reactions, and then we'll do an overall swipe so that you can see what we got. Here we go.
Ready?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you got so much in here.
I know.
I feel so bad I didn't give you as much.
No, it's totally fine because I just figured you could use what you need and toss what you don't. You know, I have a lot in my stash, as you know.
Oh my gosh, these are so cool.
Oh, should I wait for you first?
No, go ahead. We're going at the same time.
I'm so excited. I'm like, Christmas morning.
Yeah, Christmas morning, the side of the family that just does all the gifts at the same time.
I'm come from the family where we're like one gift at a time.
I do too, yeah.
Oh my god, these are so cool. Are these 3D printed?
Yes.
Oh my god, these little boats. So I did 3 of those each, so you could do, you know, shelf fillers if you need.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully there's 3 games of each.
Gotcha.
Those are just for funsies.
Oh my gosh. They're Beetlejuice earrings. They're sandworms.
I hope you don't have those.
I don't.
Okay, good.
I don't. Those are so cool. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to give you some kits, and I thought the cat clock might work in a toy shop.
Yes, I love it.
And then
frames all day long. Oh yeah. Now I want to go make my project right now. This helps actually.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Gosh. All right, so we'll lay everything out.
Yes.
And then I'll do a swipe over and you guys can check out the miniatures. And then we'll both get back to making our miniature seats. My gosh, look. I ripped you off. I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. Like I'm appreciative for anything, honestly. As you know, I've got a big stash at the house, so.
Thankfully, I was able to find a few more items to pass on to Whitney after she had kind of told me some of her ideas, so I didn't feel as bad, but she had given me so many wonderful pieces, and I'm so excited to get them up on the shelves inside of the toy shop. And I don't know if you noticed, but in a previous video, I have already been wearing those Beetlejuice earrings she gave me because they are so cute, and really people don't notice what they are at first until they really start looking and see that they are sandworms. So thank you so much, Whitney. I'm now at the exciting part where I get to put some of the toys in place. However, because I can only access things from the top, I am basically going to take all the furniture out, reorganize it just like it sits in the room, and then I can plan out where all the toys I have been collecting are going to go, because things are just going to be falling. I'm going to be dropping them if I'm trying to do like this. So let's get started on placing the toys. I'm going to be using some toys that I've been collecting over a long period of time, and of course the amazing items that Whitney gave me. I'm also going to be including this little coat stand because I want it to seem as though the owner was really cozy in this shop. I have a rocking horse, and then I don't end up using this little chair, but I was just trying to play around with things that I already had. This little plane used to be on a Christmas decoration that was no longer in use, and this cash register is an old pencil sharpener. I've had that one for a while, and I'm excited to finally put it to use. Setting up the furniture on my desktop made this so much easier to play around and really figure out where I wanted each of the items to be. I put all of the really cool games into this tall shelf and then scattered some of the big items around so that it looked kind of even throughout the store. I also had this little welcome mat that I had in my collection, and I don't know, this was the really fun part for me, trying to stage everything, and this is what I came up with. I also had to keep in mind the 2 front windows, which would have served as somewhat of a display for the shopkeeper, so I wanted to make something cute, but I also didn't want to make something that would block the viewer's view into the shop itself, because There really is only a couple ways to look inside. That is from the front windows or the top. After I got everything laid out, I was being very careful to make sure that I did not knock anything over, I didn't hit it, and then have to figure out where they were before. I did take several pictures, so that was key. If I did happen to knock something over, I had some kind of reminder of where everything was going to go. Then it was the arduous task of gluing everything down. I decided to use glue in this case instead of museum wax because I do want to add some aging and I plan to add some mushrooms, so gluing everything down was just going to make my life a lot easier. I took this red construction paper, cut it into very tiny rectangles, and this is going to serve as price tags that are on each individual piece. I don't really have to put a price on each item because I will be aging it and they'll kind of get messed up anyway, but having the little red tags really adds that extra step of detail that this is a shop. I followed these steps for each piece of furniture, gluing the items down and then adding the tiny price tag. Then it was time to move on to creating the mushrooms. Now I was going out of town, and so I decided to make my own little box of mushroom making things, and this is what I ended up with. This wasn't an easy task, but I did end up sculpting quite a few mushroom caps and mushroom stems individually. I didn't feel like I had enough ability in the car to be able to sculpt a full mushroom on its own. So this is what I came up with. As soon as I got back home, I baked them, and they are very unique, very handmade looking, but I do think once they're all painted and put together, it does work pretty well as looking like natural mushrooms that wouldn't all have a uniform look to them. To make sure I have a strong bond, I am using both super glue and wood glue to put these pieces together. They pretty much instantly dry whenever you put super glue and wood glue together, which made this process go a little faster than it would have otherwise. I'm also going to be using wire as a stem because I want them to have that really thin, delicate look that some mushrooms have, and I wanted them to be peeking out from inside of the furniture, and the wire is going to be so much stronger at this thinness than polymer clay would. I painted everything a yellow ochre, and this was something that I went over with my patrons in a live stream. We kind of went through some different color ideas, and so that was really fun to put this together with them and kind of talk through some things. It helped me kind of visualize what I wanted when it came to the mushrooms. After the mushrooms were applied, I could add some green moss. Anywhere there's a mushroom, I want some kind of moss, and this is going to help cover up the base where it is hot glued. And the wood glue I am using to put the moss in place is going to act as an extra amount of glue that's going to hold over time. I had a lot of fun figuring out where to put the mushrooms. These little bears were Christmas ornaments that had some ribbon in their head, and when I took it out, there was a hole, so it seemed like a natural place to put a mushroom. At this point, I found this little white box in my collection, and I wanted to kind of start figuring out the story of what happened here. So I decided to make this box into a special delivery. I hand wrote this onto a red ribbon and made it look like it was holding the box together, and the box was recently opened by the shop owner to see what was inside. So the idea is that perhaps it was an accident or perhaps it was sabotage to the shop owner, but someone sent a special delivery, and upon opening it, the shop owner realized there might be some trouble with these really bright yellow mushrooms. I added in several mushrooms here to really make it look like it's coming out from the box, or at least maybe that's where all of this originated. And then I had to age the box in place, and I added a bunch of moss everywhere, so it looks like it's starting to take over the counter. I realized it was going to be much easier to add the spots to the mushrooms that I wanted to create once it was glued in place, because I didn't have to hold them, wait for them to dry before I placed them down, and then found a place for them in the diorama. So I didn't add the spots with the dotting tool until everything was in place. And then I could start putting my items back into the store once all the dots were dry. And in the future, I do add a layer of Mod Podge to them. So you may have noticed this little lonely piece of furniture in the corner that has nothing on it. Well, that is because I want it to be taken over by one giant mushroom that is breaking out of the front window. And this is going to be the explanation on why the window is broken. And it's also going to draw the viewer's eye from the exterior all the way to the interior so they can kind of figure out what is going on. I started with some sculpting wire and added aluminum foil around it. This is going to be glued onto the base and sticking through the front window. I'm going back and forth to make sure that it's going to work and I'm not going to accidentally sculpt it to where I can't get it through the window. When doing something like this, I always suggest the cheapest aluminum foil you can get, because if you get really expensive stuff, it's a lot thicker and harder to work with. And it's more likely to give you aluminum foil cuts. So get the really cheap thin stuff and it will be great for sculpting. I want it to look as though this mushroom has started to engulf some of the toys and kind of affected them to where they are moving. So I'm going to use one of these trains to make it look like it's going up the mushroom stem. And on the bottom shelf, there's a little truck that's being eaten up. I also want to make a really large mushroom on the outside. It has not broken into the store, but perhaps there was some kind of mushroom spore that got spilt onto the sidewalk and it's taken over. I think this will really bring my theme that's going on the inside to the outside as well. So here is my aluminum foil sculpture, and this is to give me an idea of, do I like how this is looking before I put it all in place. I wanted to initially sculpt this with paper clay, but I knew it was going to be a pain to roll out paper clay and try to wrap it around the foil. And this would also add a lot of bulk. So instead of doing that, I'm using some lightweight drywall spackling, and I'm just using a brush and I'm brushing it onto the foil. This is going to fill in all the little cracks in the aluminum foil, and I can do this in really thin layers over time. The key to this is letting it dry completely with each layer, because if I don't let it dry completely, I could risk there being some kind of mold that happens. This is about 3 or 4 layers of the drywall compound, and it really did stack up, and I could have made it a bit smoother, but I did like that it was a bit lumpy. I feel like it gives it a bit more of a tree trunk look, but when you get to the top, you realize, oh, that is definitely a mushroom. I painted everything the same yellow ochre that I did on the inside, and then I used a larger ball stylus to add the brown polka dots to the very top of the mushroom caps. And this was really fun to do. I felt like it was starting to come alive. I added Mod Podge to the smaller mushrooms, like I said previously, and one of the reasons is because I knew I could add it to the outside and it would really protect that on the outside of my project. However, it ended up being way too shiny for me. I just felt like that's all I could see was the shine. So I do address that a little bit later. But first, I had to finish filling the shelves. I decided to put books all along the top. I added a little baseball bat that's kind of falling over on the second shelf, and then of course a ton of moss. This is going to cover up the edges of my mushroom, fill in any gaps where aluminum foil might still be showing, and all in all, just kind of bring this whole thing together to match the other pieces of furniture. So to fix the shine, I decided to use a watered down white paint, and it is still shiny, but it's a lot less shiny, and I'm happy with how it's looking now. I'm glad I took the time to fix that. I think I finally have all of the mushrooms finished up, so it's time to complete the final details. I've written a list, and this time I've actually remembered to pull out a single shoe, which is my signature for my finished project, so I won't forget it this time. I'm going to put a few posters on the wall, a notice on the front door of what is going on in here, and a few final aging touches before I can call this project complete. So let's finish those up. We're going to start this process by gluing all of the furniture in place. Now I am just going to put a few dots of glue because if there is something that happens, say a mushroom breaks off or some kind of damage that's going to be difficult to reach in there and just easily fix, I want to be able to rip the furniture out without without destroying the entire piece. So I'm just putting a few dots of glue, and this is going to hold it in place unless I put some force, and then I can get it back out. I'm going to start in the corner with the large mushroom so that I can make sure I get it through the window correctly. And then I'm just going to be building up to the larger pieces of furniture. I don't want to put them in first because they take up a lot of room. I want to make sure I can get those smaller pieces in and there's enough room for them while I add in everything else. I am so happy with how this bar or counter came out. I think it is the perfect piece for this room, and everything else just kind of rotates around it. I think it really brings it together as like a fun little shop you would go into. I'm not going to glue the dollhouse in yet because I need to add some more of the moss around the base of the mushroom, and that would just kind of get into the way, so I'm holding on to that for now. I printed out a lot of toy ads, and I'm going to add these to the walls in the spaces where there isn't really anything at the moment. Before gluing them in, I am going to mess with the edges just a bit to make them look like they are older posters that have been up there for a while. And this is the reason right here, as you will see, that I made sure to plan all of the toys outside on my desktop instead of trying to do it with everything in the shop, because I would have constantly been dropping and trying to pick things back up. I have this little curiosity shelf in my collection. It is signed on the back, so I'm going to make sure when I add my glue that I don't put it over the signature in case I remove this piece to use it again. But it had Casper the Friendly Ghost, which I remember him from my childhood. Like, the Casper was everywhere. So I was excited to add that piece in. And then of course I had to age everything in place, including the areas of the floor now that I know where the mushrooms are going to be, around some of the furniture, and of course on the posters of the wall, because if there is a lot of moisture going on because of the sudden attack of the mushrooms, I need to make sure that I am accounting for that in how the floor and the walls look. I added more of the moss around the base of the mushroom and around some parts of the floor, but I don't want to add too much to the floor. I do need a space for your eye to rest since so much else is going on everywhere. I have one final mushroom. I am going to glue that to the floor right in front of the door. And I also have this little baby bed, and I want to add the shoe. This is the shoe I'm going to be adding in for this project. I signed the side of it. It is going to be sitting in the little baby bed, which is going to be in front of the counter. So I'm excited to add that in. I finally remembered to add the shoe in the actual video where I'm making the project. And I love that it's yellow to match the yellow mushrooms. For the coat on the coat rack, I wanted to add a colorful piece of fabric, and to make this, I'm basically just going to fold it up and glue it in place. I'm not even really making a coat, I just want to make the suggestion of a coat. And this is really one of the only personal items we could maybe associate with the shop owner, so I like to think that this was a colorful personality, someone who would wear a very brightly colored jacket to their brightly colored job. I'm going to add this little plane that I had mentioned earlier into the corner. I added a bead on the bottom because I want it to be popped up a little bit from the top of the shelf. I'm going to glue that in place and, of course, add more moss just like the rest of the store. We've got a ton of moss, a ton of mushrooms, and I want to continue that theme throughout the entire piece. And aging. Yes, the theme of aging as well. On the outside, I need to create the broken window, so I still have the piece that I cut out from the window frame. I broke that up and then cut out some more little pieces of plastic that are going to look like glass shards that have fallen down. I'm adding some more moss. This is going to help glue these pieces in place. And then I can move on to the posters. So I have an emergency evacuation notice and spores detected on site. These posters add to the unspoken story of this little shop and possibly the world that this shop is set in, that it is currently being taken over by a mushroom invasion, and the humans are trying to fight back as best they can by possibly closing down stores or places that spores have been detected. So here is a final look at the entire project. It is probably the busiest looking project I have ever created, but let me know what you think in the comments. that's all I have for this video. Thank you again so much to Whitney for doing this collaboration with me. I will leave a link to her channel and her video in the description box below so you can go see what happened to her toy shop. And I will say, if you enjoy my pop culture projects like the Beetlejuice house or the Addams Family house, I bet you'll find something else you'll like on her channel, as she's done many pop culture references, including The Shining, What We Do in the Shadows, and currently she's working on something Back to the Future. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Should I come up from the table?
That would be fun if you want to.
Do that. Okay, let's see. We'll see how it works.
Okay.
Wait, can you see me?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Breaking news at 7 o'clock. We've already been facing giant mushroom invasion, but now we have the attack of the giant fluffy dogs. No, no, say it ain't so. Not the giant fluffy dogs. Ah! Attack. Attack it. Don't lick that. Don't lick that. Oh my goodness.